third episode of the Soul Care Wednesdays. I hope you guys are doing well. So we have been doing something about soul care. It's not going to be just for the month of September. We have got a few things to do that will last us through, who knows, potentially to the end of the year. So we have done 2 episodes of the Soul Care Wednesday. Episode 1 was all about forgiveness. Episode 2 was all about identity. And today is episode 3. And episode 3 will be all about breaking bad habits or cycles. Growing up in the village, I grew up, as I already said in some of my recordings, we were quite a huge family, but we grew up on a farm. So my mom and dad had a farm, and we all lived together in the village. That meant that I can't remember city life until when I was really rather quite mature, when I started going to Nairobi to visit my siblings and things like that. And there were families that were really known for some patterns. For example, you hear somebody saying, oh, so-and-so's daughter just became pregnant. And that's something that is very typical because the older sister as well did that. Or you hear so-and-so's son has been arrested for doing this and this and this. But it's because it runs in the family. And it was so common, and it was so sadly very easily identifiable that some families were always identified for some characters or characteristics or some patterns. And even it might be that was in my village. For some of us, it could be ourselves. There will be some times where we are constantly identified by some patterns. Somebody will say, Claire is this. And there are some patterns that just keep on repeating themselves. They're like on repeat mode, right? Some patterns that it just feels like, for some of us, it could be some addictions that we're kind of constantly just like stuck in a rut, right? Stuck in a cycle, things like that. For some of us, it could be our expenditure, how we spend our money, how we spend our time. Some of us will be in our relationship with food. We eat, we are like super happy, excited about eating. But if you really try to look at it, we are actually not eating because we are hungry, and we end up in places, spaces, situations whereby we kind of become even gluttons, not because necessarily we wanted to, but because of the patterns and the systems that we are used to or we are stuck in. So I've been thinking about those patterns. I've been thinking about those kind of patterns that require you to do something about them. Those patterns that, particularly when it comes to those negative patterns, right? It's easier to identify yourself with positive patterns because you'll be like, oh, it's a positive pattern. Hallelujah. Praise the Lord. And you move with those positive patterns. How about the negative patterns that kind of become so repetitive in our lives? As I've said, for example, some of us, me included, I've mentioned this openly before. There are patterns, for example, I love spending, and I was talking the other day to my husband's nephew, and I was saying to him, when I go to the shop, I can leave and go and say, I'm going to go to the shop and buy ketchup and then come back home. When I come back, I'll come back with 10 different things that I've bought, which I didn't really need, because once I get there, I just feel like I can do this, I can do that, I can do that. And it's a cycle or a pattern that comes from so many things that I've literally told myself, well, this is a way of rewarding myself. And it's kind of in a way, my mind is fixated, my body is fixated, my emotions are fixated, and they always associate going to the shop and buying stuff as a reward mechanism, right? I remember there's a time when I was going through a rough patch in life. We all do, if you're genuine and you're really sincere. And I realized my pattern of how I was dealing with the stuff I was going through was, at the end of the day, I'll go in my room and I'll get onto online shopping, and I'll be on Amazon. I'll check the stuff that I need or stuff that I want rather than need. And then I fill my basket and I say, I don't need this. And then I go to sleep and I feel like, I need to go back and revisit my basket. When I get there, then I'm like, you know what? You've done so much hard work putting your stuff in the basket. Why are you leaving it in the basket? And then I will end up clicking pay. Then once I've finished paying, I start feeling, goodness me, why did I spend £100 that I didn't intend to spend because of a pattern that I've allowed to continue to spiral and to become part of my life? I mean, there are some patterns that I notice really difficult or as problematic, like, for example, I don't know. There are other patterns that can actually land you into trouble, because if, for example, you are constantly in a pattern of spending the money that you don't have, you can end up in trouble because you'll end up in debt. Nobody wants to live a life that is full of debt. You might not be able to invest in anything because obviously every time you're spending money on unnecessary spending. If your pattern is you can't control your hunger, you can end up getting to a point where you're constantly eating and you'll be fighting things like obesity, overweight, etc. There can be bigger, stronger like patterns that can actually as well result in things that are more problematic. Things like some families are known for patterns like, oh, they'll say, oh, you know that family where women never get married. Oh, you know that family where nobody gets employed. Oh, you know that family where nobody gets beyond this level of education. But you know those patterns, sometimes I was reading something this week that really triggered my thinking, and this person was saying sometimes we are thinking when it comes to these patterns, we need to break those patterns. Yes, it's amazing and it's a good thing for us to break those patterns. For those of us who are Christians, we can pray about them, we can fast, we can seek God counsel, we can go for deliverance sessions. Those can be initial stages that we can actually have to break those patterns. But somebody was actually saying something that triggered me, because they said you can as well, instead of wanting to really fight on breaking those old patterns, create new patterns. And you create new patterns which you become what you constantly repeat, right? So you keep on repeating those new patterns until they become part of you. So for example, with my spending habit, I'm starting, and please God help me, I'm starting to get to a point where I'm like, Claire, when you go shopping, you will go with the budget, a shopping list, and you will stick only to the list. Number two, when I leave home, I tell myself, me and shops, we only go to the shop when it's necessary. So I don't just find myself close to a shop, because when I find myself close to the shop, I think my mind is acclimatized to go like, we need to shop. So I am not going to a shop if I don't need shopping. If I'm going to work, I go to work, I come back from work, I go home. I don't go close to any shop, because I'm like, this is going to be something that some of the habits and the patterns that we need to break will mean having to be very intentional and saying, girl, boy, wherever, we need to break this, or we need to actually establish a new pattern so that at the end of the day, we are having those patterns that are serving us. If your pattern is you love overeating, which can be by mistake, for example, I hope it's by mistake, why not create a new pattern? And in those new patterns, do things like portion sizes. You're like, this is the portion that I have. I was talking to my sister the other day, and she really challenged me. She said to me, I was chatting to her and she was brushing her teeth. And I was like, why are you brushing your teeth at 6 in the night? And she goes like, because I finished eating. If I don't brush my teeth, my mind will tell me there's a snack there, there's this, go and eat. But because I don't want to eat and overeat, I'm brushing my teeth so that I know me and eating today, we are done. If it is, for example, things like you are living a sedentary life, that's a pattern that defined you in the past. Why not create a new pattern and just say, every single day, I'll wake up 30 minutes earlier before time, I'll go for a walk, or I go for a run, or in the evening when I come back home, I will do 30 minutes of my time. I'm not asking myself to do 20 hours because I'm going to fail, but I'll start with 15 minutes. I'll start with 10 minutes. I'll start with 20 minutes and build it into a new regime. Start new patterns, right? Start new habits. And it might take time to establish those new habits for them to become part of you, right? They say it takes 21 days to establish a habit. Other people say it can take up to 256 days for it to become a lifestyle. But if you start day one and you keep on telling yourself every single day, we are creating new habits, and human beings are creatures of habits, whether we like it or not. That's how God created us. So you tell yourself, my new habit is, for me, I am only going to buy or spend when is necessary, avoid unnecessary expenditure. So when I go to the shop, my new habit is, I said, I do my shopping list and I stick to my shopping list. Your new habit might be, I said, it might be portion sizes. Somebody else's new habit might be, wherever it is, try to and tell yourself, identify those things that you know pretty much they are not serving you the purpose, they are not helping in your being a human being that God created you to be, and then begin to work on how are we going to change this. It is much more easier to establish. You can establish, like I call it the law of displacement. You can easily displace something with something new. And of course, once you start wanting to do that, you'll find sometimes your body will reject it. You have like times that you feel like, well, I get myself on the internet and I'm like, oh, I've seen that really nice pair of shoe. I'm like, girl, pair of shoe, you're not buying a pair of shoe. There'll be those temptations that will come. There'll be those things that you might need more than just telling yourself. Some things I've talked about, I've said before, they may need maybe therapy for some of us. Some of us may need to work with professionals to get ourselves to move away from those patterns. But one thing I would love to encourage us all to say, we will be bad habit breakers. I don't want it to be known every time somebody thinks or talks about my family. Oh, that family that never gets to university. I want to be the first one to get to university, right? Oh, that family that has only obese people. No, I'm not going to be the one who's obese in my family. I'm going to be the first one to work hard to lose weight so that I can have the right weight. Because once you've started those new patterns, you're setting a trend that other people will follow. And for some of us, will be trends that our children will follow. Our children will want to be like us, right? If you set the right pace, you will get to a point where, so I was talking to my boss the other day and she said to me, Claire, do you realize you both are career people, but when your son looks at you and looks at the dad, most likely he is not even interested in the things that his dad does. He's not interested in the travels. He's not interested in whatever careers that your husband is actually following, but you are setting a trend for your children. Your son will look at you and say, because mama has done this, I want to do something like her or better than her. I was talking again to my sister-in-law, and she told me a similar thing. And she told me, Claire, I did not need a degree at this stage, but because I want to be a pattern setter and a pattern breaker for some of these things for my children, I've decided to go back to school, and I sit down with them in the evening. They do their homework. I say, I also have a homework. We sit down and do our homework. And the kids are like, oh, wow, mommy, I want to be like mommy. You can set a new rhythm. You can set a new pattern, and that new rhythm and new pattern can actually become something that could even change your career prospects, could even change. People can start coming to you and asking you, how did you manage to change the narrative of your family? How did you manage to be the one that has broken the chain, so to say, of that slavery or that bondage that has occurred or appeared in your family for the long term possible? Maybe for some people it might be more deep rooted issues that I might not be able to go through in only 20 or 15 minutes of this recording, but you might actually want to do a little bit more exercise for yourself. Sit down and just evaluate yourself. Think about those patterns in your life and think about those things that you're like, I don't think they serve me well. Then have a conversation with yourself. Call yourself into a meeting and say, Claire, what can we do to change this? Let us be intentional about ending some bad habits, about ending some bad patterns and trends in our lives, and starting something new, that we will look back and say, wow, how did I manage to do this? And you'll be careful to go back and say, it was the grace of God that enabled me to do this. But you can look back and say, thank God I've been able to break that pattern. And for those of us who are parents, as I said, you might be doing this for generations to come. Identify those patterns that are great and service them and continue to pass them on. But those patterns that are not helpful, are not really in any way useful, deal with them. And the way of dealing with them for some of us will be just deciding and saying, this reckless life, I've had enough of you. I'm going to change. I'm going to live a new life. For some of us, it could be, we're just serial liars. You might want to start by just practicing saying truth for 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, and let that become a new pattern. So this has been another Soul Care Wednesday, so that I don't make this too long. I've got other things I'm doing. Thank you so much for all your love and support. I pray that you will prosper and be in good health even as yourselves prosper. Guys, I've got to bring this to an end, but let's go check those patterns in our lives, identify those things that we want to work on. I am working on my own. As I said, these episodes, a series, are literally for me, because I'm like, Claire, those things that don't serve you well in your life, get rid of them, because you only have less than 100 days to the end of the year. And there's some baggage we're not carrying to 2025. We are leaving that baggage this end of the year, so that as we're going into 2025, we're going into 2025 with new habits, new targets, setting those things for ourselves, saying, you know what? I am a new creation. Even the Bible says so. We become new creations. The old is gone, the new has come. Don't move with the old patterns in the new and expect to see differences, right? They say a fool does the same thing over and over again, expecting to see different results. If you want to see different results, sometimes you've got to change the way you do things. And sometimes it might be starting something new and sticking to it. That's how you bring change around, isn't it? So I will leave you with that. Have a blessed evening. God bless. Love you plenty. Until next Wednesday, I shall see you in another episode. Till then, have a great evening. Goodbye and God bless. Bye.